Our planet is home to about 1.8 million identified species. Of these species, about 46,000 of them are currently threatened with extinction. This number only comes from the 28% of species that have been assessed by the IUCN. Species become endangered as their population numbers decrease and can approach extinction naturally towards the end of their lifespan. This can be caused by environmental factors such as habitat fragmentation, natural disaster, or global change, as well as by genetic factors like inbreeding, poor reproduction, or just a general decline in population numbers. Naturally, the background extinction rate is approximately 1 out of 1 million species every year. However, since the exponential increase in human population, the current extinction rate is estimated to be 1,000 to 10,000 times higher. This means that more than 99% of at-risk species are threatened as a direct result of human involvement. And while some of these species are well known to most, many of our planet's threatened inhabitants tend to go almost completely unnoticed by the general public. This brings our attention to the Rio Ameca, near Jalisco, Mexico, the original home of Ameca Splendens, more commonly known as the butterfly splitfin. But before we meet our new aquatic friend, let's take a quick pause for a check for understanding. We'll start off simple with a quick fill in the blank. The natural background extinction rate is 1 out of how many, every how often. And we'll set a timer for, say, 10 seconds. Alright, so that wasn't so bad. Now let's move on with getting to know the butterfly splitfin.
Butterfly splendens are endemic from Rio Ameca, Jalisco, Mexico. They prefer waters that are rich in minerals like ponds, streams, canals. They also like warm environment, so the temperature that they prefer ranges from 26 to 32 Celsius with a pH of 6 to 8. Ameca splendens are herbivorous fishes. You can normally feed them diatoms and algae, but another preference can be larvae, mosquito larvae, and earthworms. So, the fish was collected in 1948, and research found out that they are an adaptable species, but they noticed also that in 1996 the fish population was going down, and they claimed this an endangered species. But luckily for the fish, some fish enthusiasts and some hobbyists took matters on their own, taking the fish home, kind of like taking care of the fish. With all this being said, let's hear how one of the hobbyists take care of the fish.
This is one of the more popular Gadaid species in the aquarium hobby, so thankfully, aquarium hobbyists have been able to preserve this fish. This fish gets to be a pretty decent size, topping out at about 4 inches for the females and 3 inches for the males. The Gadaid Working Group recommends a tank size of 250 liters, which is about 66 US gallons. But I think you can definitely keep them in a smaller tank, with the minimum being a 29 gallon, with a 40 gallon breeder being ideal. I maintained my current colony in a 40 breeder for quite a long time, and they did just fine. I found these fish to be quite hardy and really do well with just some basic aquarium care requirements. I currently run my large colony in a 75 gallon with just a couple of sponge filters and some plants, which has done an adequate job filtration wise. These fish will accept a wide variety of foods, from flake, small pellets, live and frozen. I really have not found anything these fish will not eat. My main diet for these fish is primarily a mix of extreme krill and extreme spirulina flakes. One thing you will need to watch with these fish is temperature. These fish generally do prefer cooler water, below 75 degrees, but in my experience, I have found these fish to be a little bit more tolerant of high temperatures than some of the other Gadaid species. These fish do like fairly hard water and a higher pH level. My fish room is currently running at a pH between 7.8 to 8.0. Due to their endangered nature, I would highly discourage you from keeping them with other fish. I've really not noticed a ton of aggression with these fish, not even any squabbling amongst the males, which you can find from Gadaid species from time to time. If you really do want to keep them with another fish, you could possibly look at keeping them with rainbow fish if you're housing them in a 40 gallon tank or larger. You could also maybe try something like a bristlenose pleco, as long as you don't let the temperatures get too cold. I would avoid keeping these fish with other Gadaid species to avoid possible hybridization. Sexing the Ameca Splendens is quite simple. Males will have a white outline on the back of their tail fins and are generally a little bit smaller than the females. Unlike the guppies, platies, and other passerulid livebearers, the male Gadaids do not have a gonopodium, but instead have a small notch in their anal fin, which they use to inseminate the females. While they do give birth to live young, the process is a little different than your passerulid livebearers. The gestation period for Ameca Splendens is 60 days, and the females will give birth to fewer fry. Most of the time these fry number less than 10, but are larger than your typical passerulid fry. In this case, the Ameca Splendens fry are about 3/4 of an inch long. One interesting fact about Gadaid reproduction is that the fry are attached to the mother with an umbilical cord type structure called a crophotienae. I found the Ameca Splendens to be good parents and not aggressive fry eaters. The fry will eat readily and will take up ground up flake food and any other appropriately sized foods.
Now seems like a great time to pause for another quick question. How long is the gestation period for a female Ameca Splendens? Let's give you guys a couple of options and 10 seconds on the timer.
Now I guess the final question would be, if Ameca Splendens has proven itself to be so hardy, what has happened that makes it critically endangered? Regardless of how adaptable an organism can be, I think every living thing has its limits. And I think that the butterfly split fin began to meet its limits with the construction of the La Vega reservoir. When the reservoir was created, it dramatically reduced the water flow, which in turn dramatically reduced the oxygen levels of the water. Now for a fish like Ameca Splendens that prefers fast-flowing waters, that's going to be a big issue. Another big issue, of course, is going to be water pollution. Near the river, there's a sugar mill factory as well as some farms, some agave farms. Now, the factory began to dump its sewage, its waste into the river, while the farms, they're farms, so what are they doing? They're spraying their crops with pesticides. That runoff made its way directly into the Rio Ameca. So you have this fish that has to deal with not only reduced water flow and oxygen, but now is coming into direct contact with, poisons and toxins. And as if that weren't enough to deal with, butterfly split fins had to begin to share their habitat with the spot-tailed killifish. Spot-tailed killifish is another live bearer, but it's not endemic to the Rio Ameca. It was an invasive species. So now the next question is, well, how did the spot-tailed killifish get there? As temperatures rise and the water's warm, now the spot-tail can gain access to habitats that it previously couldn't because they were just colder before. Research on the spot-tailed killifish has shown that when it gains access to waters that it previously was unable to, it causes competition for those endemic species. And those endemic species, in order to avoid any type of negative interaction with the invasive one, will try to adapt to cooler waters to try to stay away. So now you have this issue where they're kind of running away and they're running towards colder waters. But if the waters are warming, those cold waters become less and less available. So with all these pressures, it really comes as no surprise that while Ameca Splendens is not entirely extinct in the wild, there's only one wild population left, and they're found near Teochitlan, Mexico, in this water park called El Rincon. And the water park does put forth effort into preserving that population, but really the survival of the species is hinging on fish enthusiasts and hobbyists and other like-minded individuals who have said, hey, we don't want to lose this species. They're pretty easy to take care of. Why don't we just take care of them on our own? And I think that's a really powerful sentiment. It's meaningful. I think it shows that while humans have this tendency to disrupt the balance of life and nature, that should not stop us from putting forth energy into preserving nature and undoing the damage and trying to save these species for future generations, not just human generations, just future generations of life itself.
And now we'll conclude with one more quick matching game of habitat loss cause and effect. This time, we'll give you 25 seconds on the timer to match the causes with the correct effects. Alright, that's all the time we have. Hopefully you walk away with not only some knowledge of how we impact the world around us, but also with some inspiration for how you can help some species that may not exactly be able to help themselves. Even if it's something as simple as adopting a fish or two.